The film opens with Solomon and several enslaved men laboring in a sugarcane field. Overlooking them is a man resting atop a wagon, calmly fanning himself, a striking contrast to the suffering below. Later, at supper, Solomon secretly saves a few berries, hoping to use the juice as ink to write a letter. Sadly, the plan fails. The juice is too watery and the ink doesn't hold, leaving him frustrated and defeated. That night, as everyone sleeps cramped in the quarters, a woman quietly climbs into Solomon's space. Longing for her lost husband, she clings to him and begins to cry. Solomon says nothing, instead lost in thoughts of his own family, memories of happier times with his wife and children. Rewinding back to those better days, Solomon is shown as a free man, living in Saratoga, New York, a talented violinist. He is well respected and content. One morning, he sees his wife and children off as they leave town for work. Later that day, while walking in the park, Solomon runs into two men, Mr. Brown and Mr. Hamilton, introduced to him by an acquaintance. They claim to work for a traveling circus and offer Solomon a generous payment to perform with them in Washington. The job sounds brief and rewarding, so Solomon agrees. After the performance, the men treat Solomon to dinner and drinks, even paying him more than promised, insisting he deserves it. Solomon drinks with them, unaware that they've drugged him. When he wakes, he's shackled in a cell with no memory of how he got there. Panicked, Solomon insists he's a free man from New York, but his captors dismiss his claims. They call him a runaway slave from Georgia and respond to his protests with a brutal beating. Left alone in the cell, Solomon curls up in pain. Eventually, he's moved into a pen with two others, a man named Clemens and a boy. Clemens, an educated man, explains his own capture. Soon, a woman named Eliza arrives with her daughter and son, who turns out to be the boy already in the pen. Though devastated, Eliza tries to hold herself together for her children. Under cover of darkness, the captives are taken to a ship. Cramped into the lower hold like cargo, they find themselves stacked beside others. Among them is Robert, who speaks of fighting back and taking the ship. But after weighing the risks, they decide to remain cautious. That night, a sailor sneaks into the hold and targets Eliza. When Robert tries to intervene, the sailor stabs him. The next morning, Solomon and Clemens are ordered to toss Robert's body into the sea. Clemens solemnly mutters that perhaps Robert is better off. At the next port, Clemens hears his master calling. With no hesitation, Clemens runs to him, abandoning all signs of friendship and forgetting Solomon completely, even as Solomon begs for help. Shortly afterward, a man named Freeman arrives to collect his new slaves. He refers to Solomon as Platt. When Solomon fails to respond, Freeman strikes him across the face and warns him not to question his identity again. The group is prepped and lined up for sale. Freeman, showing them off like livestock, pushes aside a hanging slave without care. A man named Ford expresses interest in both Solomon and Eliza. Sensing an opportunity, Eliza begs him to buy her children too, but Freeman refuses. Her son is sold to another buyer, and her daughter is also kept behind. In the end, only Eliza and Solomon go with Ford. Heartbroken, Eliza breaks down, causing a scene. Freeman orders her to be restrained and instructs Solomon to play his violin to restore calm. When they arrive at Ford's plantation, he orders his men to give Solomon and Eliza rest and food before work begins. Ford's wife, after hearing Eliza's story, callously remarks that a good night's sleep will help her forget her children. The next day, Solomon meets Ford's overseer, Chapin, and a handler named Tibeats. As they work, Tibeats sings a mocking tune about the dangers of trying to escape. During a brief encounter with a native group, Solomon sees one of them playing a stringed instrument, reminding him of his violin and former life. Later, Solomon suggests a smarter way to transport logs using the river. Tibeats mocks him, calling him a slave, not an engineer. But Ford listens and follows Solomon's plan, which succeeds. Tibeats is humiliated. In return for his help, Ford gives Solomon a violin. One afternoon, Eliza breaks down near the quarters. Fearing trouble, Solomon tells her to stop, and she lashes out, accusing him of suppressing his own grief and blindly obeying his master. She hints that Ford suspects Solomon may be a free man, but chooses not to act. The idea haunts Solomon. Eventually, Ford's wife demands Eliza be removed due to her constant weeping. Meanwhile, Tibeats begins taking his frustrations out on Solomon. The tension between them escalates, until one day, Tibeats attempts to beat Solomon, but Solomon fights back. He grabs the whip and attacks Tibeats, turning the tables. Chapin rushes in, stopping the fight. Tibeats threatens revenge and storms off. Chapin warns Solomon not to leave the plantation, as he can't protect him if he does. Later, Tibeats returns with two men and attempts to lynch Solomon. Chapin intervenes with a gun, driving them off. Left hanging by the neck but not fully strangled, Solomon barely survives by tiptoeing on the ground. The other slaves go about their work, mostly ignoring him, except for one woman who brings him water. Nearly a full day passes before Ford returns and cuts Solomon down. He shelters him inside, but knows it's no longer safe. To protect Solomon, Ford arranges to sell him to a man named Epps, despite knowing Epps is cruel. Still, he's the only one willing to take Solomon, whose reputation now makes him a risk. Solomon tries to explain to Ford that he's a free man, but Ford doesn't want to hear it. He fears that knowing too much would only bring complications. On the day Solomon is transferred to Epps's plantation, the new owner reads from the Bible, twisting scripture to justify beating his slaves. His warped message is meant to assert dominance, not faith. After a long day picking cotton, the workers are judged based on how much they've harvested. Solomon's amount is under the expected weight, and like others who fell short, he's whipped without mercy. Epps's favorite slave is a woman named Patsy. He showers her with attention and caresses her, clearly favoring her over the others. Late one night, Epps disrupts everyone's sleep, demanding they entertain him with dancing. As music plays, his jealous wife hurls a heavy decanter at Patsy's head, knocking her to the ground. Furious, she demands her husband get rid of Patsy and threatens to leave if he doesn't. But Epps makes it clear he'd rather lose his wife than give up Patsy. After Patsy is dragged away, Epps orders the rest to keep dancing. One day, Mrs. Epps sends Solomon to town for errands. When she notices him reading the list she gave him, she warns him that knowing how to read will bring him nothing but trouble. While walking into town, Solomon witnesses a lynching, 2 black men hanging lifelessly. The horror of the sight crushes his spirit, and he quietly continues shopping. At the store, a bundle of paper catches Solomon's attention. Later, when he returns to the plantation, Mrs. Epps casually asks if he ran into any trouble. He lies, telling her he didn't. On another day, Epps sends Solomon to retrieve Patsy from a neighboring plantation. She's visiting Mrs. Shaw, a former slave who gained status after marrying a white man. Epps is nervous, thinking Shaw might try to steal Patsy from him. At Shaw's home, Solomon is urged to rest and join them for tea. When they return, Epps, drunk and irate, mistakes Solomon's concern for Patsy as something more. He lashes out, chasing Solomon across the yard. Solomon tries to calm him down, but Epps refuses to listen. Eventually, Mrs. Epps interrupts, accusing her husband of being unholy and obsessed. Later that night, Epps sneaks into the quarters, forcing himself on Patsy. He chokes her during the act, leaving her further traumatized. During another forced dance inside the house, Mrs. Epps humiliates Patsy again. Enraged by her husband's infidelity, she claws Patsy's face, leaving visible wounds. Tired of it all, Patsy begs Solomon to end her life, offering a trinket in return. Solomon refuses, telling her he can't do it. A plague soon hits the cotton fields. Epps blames his sinful slaves for the bad luck. Left with no choice, he rents them out to a man named Judge. Before they leave, Epps warns them not to bring curses to their new workplace. At Judge's property, Solomon is asked to play the violin at a party, thanks to his known talent. Judge promises he'll be allowed to keep the money he earns. Time passes. The slaves return to Epps's plantation, where he greets them with a smug welcome. As Solomon walks past Patsy, she gives him a cold stare, her face still bearing the scars. Work resumes. A new worker named Armsby joins them. Unlike the others, he's a paid laborer trying to rebuild his life. Despite producing less than Solomon, he isn't punished. That night, Armsby tends to Solomon's wounds. Sensing a chance, Solomon decides to trust him. He offers all his music earnings in exchange for mailing a letter to his friends in the north. Armsby agrees and swears secrecy. Solomon writes his letter using stolen paper from the supplies Mrs. Epps sends him to fetch. But soon, Epps confronts him, revealing he knows about the plan. Solomon instantly realizes that Armsby betrayed him. Luckily, he hadn't handed over the letter yet. Thinking quickly, Solomon manipulates the situation, accusing Armsby of making up the story to gain favor and be hired as overseer. Epps believes him, and Solomon narrowly escapes punishment. That night, he burns the letter, watching his hope for freedom go up in smoke. Later, Solomon is assigned to help build a gazebo with a northern carpenter named Bass. Bass speaks freely, openly opposing slavery. Solomon begins to trust him. One Sunday, Patsy disappears. When Epps can't find her, he assumes she ran away. When she returns, she explains she went to Shaw's to get soap, just to feel clean again. Epps, driven by jealousy and rage, refuses to listen. He finally decides to beat her. Mrs. Epps watches eagerly, but when Epps can't bring himself to do it, he orders Solomon to do it instead. Solomon hesitates, trying not to hurt her, but Epps forces him to lash her harder. Eventually, Epps grabs the whip and savagely beats Patsy himself. Solomon, shaken to the core, tells Epps that one day he'll be judged for what he's done. Later, the women on the plantation tend to Patsy's wounds. One day, while working with Bass again, Solomon asks where he's from. When Bass says Canada, Solomon shows familiarity with the region. Bass grows curious, sensing that Solomon isn't like the others. Hesitant at first, Solomon finally shares his story, how he was kidnapped from New York and sold into slavery. Moved by the truth, Bass agrees to write a letter on Solomon's behalf to his friends up north. Though he knows it puts him at great risk, Bass commits to helping. Weeks pass. Then one day, while Solomon is working in the fields, a carriage arrives. The sheriff steps out and calls for Platt. Solomon walks over. The sheriff points to a man and asks if Solomon recognizes him. Solomon does. It's Mr. Parker, a friend from Saratoga. After confirming his identity, the sheriff acknowledges Solomon as a free man. Epps tries to interfere, but the sheriff stands firm. Solomon is finally allowed to leave. As he steps into the carriage, Patsy runs to him. They share one last embrace. When Solomon finally returns home, he sees his family and breaks down in tears. His daughter introduces her child, named after him. He is home at last. Though Solomon tried to seek justice, the laws of the time failed him. He later joined the abolitionist movement, fighting to expose the horrors he endured. The details of his death remain unknown, but his story lives on. End the movie. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out our other recaps and subscribe for more content. And leave comment below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.